Assalamu alaikum. Borketo. Konnichiwa. Dear distinguished guests and all attendees, welcome to the UAE-Japan-Israel Innovation Forum. We would like to thank you for taking time to join us today. My name is Mitsuhito Sendai, Executive Vice President of JETRO. It is my great pleasure to be the moderator for this forum. Prior to the opening of the meeting, I would like to make some requests. Please refrain from taking pictures and recording. We would also appreciate your cooperation in filling out the questionnaire that will be distributed after the forum. To mark the opening, we'll have a few words from Mr. Nobuhiko Sasaki, Chairman and CEO of JETRO.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sasaki Nobuhiko, Chairman and CEO of JETRO. Thank you very much for attending this forum. I understand you are very busy at the beginning of the year. I would like to deliver greetings on behalf of JETRO, one of the organizers. Regarding Israel, it goes without saying that companies around the world pay attention to the advanced technologies Israeli startups create, and that the country attracts increasing attention as a source of innovation. The UAE has been regarded as an essential oil supplier to Japan. Moreover, it is renowned as a showcase of innovation, as its government has been committed to ecosystem development in support of startups recently. The advantage of Japan is not only manufacturing and project management, but also the solid business foundation Japanese companies have in the growing Asian market. More than 9,000 Japanese companies have bases in the ASEAN region, and this number is larger than that of the US or China. Today's forum gives the first glimpse of new business opportunities created under collaboration between the UAE, Israel, and Japan in the area of innovation amidst changes in the Middle East brought about by the Abraham Accords. In ancient Japan, January was called Mutsuki, meaning the month of fellowship. Its origin lies in the custom of Japanese families deepening their relationships in January, gathering to celebrate the new year. I would like to conclude by wishing that this forum opens your eyes to the huge potential for trilateral collaboration, and that this January will be a Mutsuki, or a month of fellowship, to deepen the business ties between the UAE, Israel, and Japan. Thank you for your attention.
I would now like to move on to the government representative speeches. First, please let me introduce His Excellency, Mr. Koichi Hagiuda, the Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry of Japan.
アッサラームアライクム、シャローム、こんにちは。経済産業大臣の萩生田光一です。JUD UAE 貿易担当大臣、マルカ・イスラエル経済産業次官をはじめご参加の皆様、本日は日 UAE イスラエルイノベーションフォーラムにお集まりいただき、誠にありがとうございます。本フォーラム開催にあたりご尽力いただいた関係各国大使館およびJETROなど関係の皆様に厚く御礼を申し上げますとともに、開催に際し一言ご挨拶をさせていただきます。日本は UAE、イスラエルそれぞれの国との間で緊密な経済関係を構築してまいりました。まず UAE について申し上げます。UAE は最も重要な
economic ties with the UAE and Israel respectively. First, I would like to talk about the UAE. As one of the most important suppliers of crude oil, the UAE has long supported Japan's economy and society and is a very important partner for our country. Under the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Initiative agreed upon by the leaders, cooperation in a wide range of areas, such as clean energy and space, has been progressing in recent years. In addition, the UAE, which attracts cutting-edge technology and human resources from all over the world, is attracting many Japanese companies as a testing ground for innovation. For the past 5 years, JETRO has established a Japanese pavilion at JITEX, the largest innovation event in the Middle East, held annually in Dubai, where the expo is being held. Last October, a number of Japanese startups also participated in the event, including PJPI, which won a special prize in a pitch contest for its successful mass production of plant-derived carbon batteries. It is encouraging to see that many Japanese companies are using the UAE as a hub for innovation and that collaboration between companies in the two countries is progressing. Next is Israel. Bilateral relations between Japan and Israel have grown dramatically in recent years, with the number of Japanese companies operating in the region increasing 3.5 times in almost a decade. The scope of economic relations between the two countries continues to expand, with Japanese trading companies investing in local startups, joint research and development, and many other concrete collaborative efforts. The Japan-Israel Innovation Network, JEAN, a public-private partnership platform established in 2017, serves as a catalyst for this movement and actively supports collaboration between the two countries. This forum is the first event to be sponsored by Japan, the UAE, and Israel together. The opportunity was brought by the normalization of diplomatic ties between the UAE and Israel in 2020. With the establishment of formal diplomatic ties between the two countries, cooperation in various fields such as finance, investment, trade, and economic relations has been progressing. I believe that the establishment of such a new economic relationship will create great new business possibilities, not only between the two countries, but also for Japan, which has good economic relations with both countries. If the UAE, which aims to become the world's innovation hub, Israel, an innovation powerhouse, and Japan, which has excellent manufacturing technology and a network that connects to the global market, collaborate, will be able to create technologies and solutions that will lead the world. In particular, as the world's economy and society are undergoing rapid changes, innovation is expected to provide solutions to global issues in such fields as green and healthcare. Through the tripartite cooperation, it should be our duty to contribute to solving global issues as we are leading global innovation. In this forum, lectures and panel discussions will be held on the themes of business opportunities brought about by the Abraham Agreement, the potential of cooperation among the three countries, and the creation of new business through innovation. I hope that the forum will be of help to the participants in the future business discussions. The year 2022 will mark the 50th anniversary of diplomatic ties between the UAE and Japan, and the 70th anniversary of the diplomatic ties between Israel and Japan. With this forum as a kickoff, we are planning for business delegations and business matchings for the future collaboration among the three countries. I would like to conclude by wishing for the further development of economic relations between the three countries. Thank you very much.
Bin Ahmed Al-Zayudi, Minister of State for Foreign Trade of the UAE.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and greetings from the UAE. It's my pleasure to join you for the UAE-Japan-Israel Innovation Business Forum to review the economic relations that bind our three countries and explore ways to build closer collaboration among our business communities. It has always been the vision of our leadership to build and maintain robust global partnership based on trust and mutual benefits. As outlined in the landmark projects of the 50th, last September, the UAE will continue to focus on building bridges with nations who share our commitment to prosperity and economic as well as social development. Japan and Israel are both important economic partners to the UAE. The Abrahamic Accords with Israel in 2020 underline our belief that the future depends on strong multilateral economic partnerships and a joint commitment to stability and prosperity. For the UAE and Israel, international trade serves as a foundation of our partnership. Between August 2020 and November 2021, the total value of non-oil trade between the UAE and Israel amounted to nearly $1.3 billion, and close to 60 major agreements between our two countries have also been concluded. Meanwhile, the total value of non-oil trade between the UAE and Japan from January to November 2021 amounted to nearly $12 billion, growing by 7% compared to the same period in 2020. Additionally, the UAE is the top trading partner to Japan in the Arab world. The two countries also enjoy a close partnership in areas including energy, medical care, education, industry, and many others. Ladies and gentlemen, the UAE views innovation as cornerstone of social, economic, and human development. So we have always strived to promote a culture of innovation throughout both public and private sectors. Last year, the Ministry of Industry and Advanced Technology launched a new initiative called the UAE Industry 4.0. It is designed to accelerate the adoption of fourth industrial revolution technologies by the UAE industrial sector. The strategy is built on partnership between the public and private sector to encourage digital transformation, develop research capabilities, and facilitate knowledge transfer and enhance the UAE's competitiveness in global markets. This is in addition to our efforts to attract the $150 billion in foreign direct investments into key sectors to spur research and developments, as well as help create the industries of the future. Our new trade agenda, based on comprehensive economic partnership agreements with like-minded nations, will stimulate exactly these kinds of investments flow. Our strategy for talent attraction and retention is another important policy in this regard. It is a 10-year plan to facilitate immigration pathways for highly skilled talent, particularly in digital and disruptive fields, and for which has been boosted by new flexible employment and residencies law. Ladies and gentlemen, the UAE, Israel, and Japan are three leading nations in technology and research as well as development. As such, there are many opportunities for us to improve greater cooperation across critical sectors such as agriculture, technology, biomedicine, and advanced manufacturing. Collective efforts are key to addressing the challenges brought by the COVID-19 pandemic and other global issues. By enhancing cooperation in technology and innovation, we will be able to find solutions that will benefit not only our respective countries, but the entire world. Joint efforts are necessary at all levels, between governments and, more importantly, between private sector entities. I would also like to highlight the importance of encouraging and enabling startups in our three countries to develop innovative projects that have wider applicability across various sectors. By working more closely together, we can support innovative entrepreneurial projects in science and technology. Governments can also work to better understand the challenges faced by our startups and entrepreneurs. This would enable us to provide practical tools and financing platforms that meet the evolving needs of innovations ecosystem. Ladies and gentlemen, it's clear that the proposed area of cooperation between our countries will accelerate the pace of businesses, increase bilateral and trilateral investments, and provide exciting opportunities for our respective private sector. The UAE looks forward to facilitating the entry of Japanese and Israeli ventures that embrace new business models and innovation. Let this be the beginning of a new era in the partnership that binds the UAE, Japan, and Israel, a distinguished global partnership that will fuel future innovation. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to ask Dr. Ron Malka, Director General of the Economy and Industry of Israel, to give us a few words.
Boker Tov in Israel, Sabah al Khir in the United Arab Emirates, and Konnichiwa in Japan. I would like to welcome all the participants who join us today for the Trilateral Innovation Forum between Israel, Japan, and the United Arab Emirates. This forum aims to strengthen the commercial and economic partnership between the countries and to bring our business communities together. The Arab Accords were signed over a year ago between Israel and the several countries, with the declaration between Israel and the United Arab Emirates being the first among them. The normalization of relations between the countries created a new channel for trade with unprecedented scope and pace of activity. Within a short time, the volume of trade between Israel and the United Arab Emirates increased and reached a volume of about $1 billion in 2021. The cooperation between the economics has not remained at the level of government declarations. Israeli and Emirate funds already cooperate with each other, and trade relations are rapidly advancing toward the establishment of a free trade agreement. We welcome the ongoing negotiations and hope that they will sign soon and will lead to prosperity and faster growth in trade volume. At the same time, this year we mark 70 years of diplomatic relations between Japan and Israel. Our partnership is stronger than ever, and it reflects first and foremost in the economic aspects. 2021 was a record year for Japanese investments in Israel, which amounted to about $3 billion, more than 3 times compared to the same period last year. We are also witnessing an increase in the number of investments, which rose from 70 to 85, an increase of about 21%. The Ministry of Economy and Industry is working vigorously to strengthen and expand the volume of trade both with Japan and with the United Arab Emirates. Alongside the extensive activity in the bilateral channels, we are interested in promoting opportunities and initiatives in a trilateral manner in sectors and areas of interest relevant to Japan, the United Arab Emirates, and Israel alike. I invite the representatives of the Japanese and Emirate companies who are watching us now to examine collaborations with the Israeli industry and to enlist the help of our professional team to explore business opportunities. In addition to our economic mission in Japan, the Ministry of Economy and Industry will make history when it opens a new office in Abu Dhabi in the coming month, Israel's first economic mission in the Gulf states. Hopefully, this will be an important step toward an expansion of the Abrahamic Accords and the opening of an additional economic missions in countries which until a few years ago were perceived as a distant dream. Before I conclude, I would like to express my gratitude to those who work to strengthen our economic relations throughout the year, the economic attachés of the 3 countries, the Israeli ambassador to Japan, and the Israeli ambassador to the United Arab Emirates. I also take this opportunity to congratulate the ambassadors of the United Arab Emirates to Israel and the Japanese ambassador to Israel. I would like to thank everyone who has taken part in the preparation of this forum, and I wish us all the success in the future. Shukran, arigato gozaimasu, toda, thank you.
Now, we'd like to move on to the keynote speech. It is my honor to have His Excellency, Dr. Nikolai Mladenov, Director of Research and Analysis of Anwar Gargash Diplomatic Academy in the UAE, as the speaker. His Excellency will give the speech on economic potential of the Abraham Accords. Now, Your Excellency have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, good evening. Hello, everyone from Abu Dhabi. It is a great honor to speak at this event and to see friends from Jerusalem, from Tokyo, and from the Gulf coming together to look at the exciting opportunities of the Abraham Accords for the economy and for businesses around the world, not just in this part of the Middle East. I would like to jump straight into a quick presentation on the economic potential of the Abraham Accords. But first, let me say that over the last year and a half, the Abraham Accords have been perhaps one of the few, if not the only good news coming out from the Middle East. They create opportunities for peace, for expanding the sphere of tolerance and understanding between cultures and nations, but most importantly, they create massive economic opportunities for the future. The Abraham Accords are known as, the first came known as the agreement between the United Arab Emirates and Israel that was signed in the United States on the 13th of August in 2020. Just a few days later, it was joined by Bahrain and became known as the whole Abraham Accords agreements became known as those that include the countries of the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Israel. These are the first normalizations of relations between Arab countries and the State of Israel since Jordan in 1994 and Egypt in 1979. These are extremely important international agreements. They're obviously named after Abraham to emphasize the shared origin of belief between Judaism and Islam, both of which are Abrahamic religions, endemic and very much important to this part of the world. Later, in 2020, in October, Sudan agreed to normalize relations with Israel as well, and soon after was followed by Morocco. If we focus a little bit more on the Treaty of Peace between the United Arab Emirates and Israel, I think it's important to understand what this treaty stands for and what opportunities it actually provides. First of all, it ends up as the full normalization of diplomatic relations between the two countries. Often this treaty is referred to as a warm treaty of peace because the two countries have never been at war with each other. It is a treaty of peace that looks to the future and outlines a strategic agenda for peace for the entire region. Importantly, for the economy, the treaty outlines some 15 areas of cooperation that are critical and that are extremely important to the future of both countries in the region. Since the treaty itself was signed, more than 60 cooperation agreements have been signed, and talks continue on critically important agreements again for the future. Going back just about a year ago, in 2021, the United Arab Emirates established a 10 billion investment fund for strategic sectors in Israel, including energy, manufacturing, water, space, healthcare, agriculture, and other fields. This fund is extremely important to stimulate the exchange of trade and the exchange of ideas between both countries. And just a couple of months ago in December, Prime Minister Bennett from Israel was the first Israeli Prime Minister to formally and officially visit the United Arab Emirates as part of the Abraham Accords. Now, if we look at the three countries, the UAE, Bahrain, and Israel, it's important to understand what are the opportunities that these three countries provide, what are the similarities and what are the differences if we have to look at them from a business perspective. The UAE, with its GDP of $421 billion, is the second largest economy in the Middle East. Bahrain is obviously a smaller economy, yet just as dynamic and important. The UAE also has a population of 9.7, close to 9.7 million people, and Bahrain 1.6 million people in itself. Both countries have a very young population and an increasing demand for technological innovation ranging in all spheres, from water, desalination, to clean energy, to telecommunications and innovation. And this is critically important, again, I say, for the future and for the opportunities that the Abraham Accords provide. Both countries are transitioning away from oil dependency at their own speed and in their own strategies. And the United Arab Emirates has focused on becoming the most competitive economy in the world, with increasing its trade, its own competitiveness has its economy and inward investment, which is extremely important again. Both Bahrain and the UAE have a tradition of interfaith tolerance and understanding, with Bahrain having the only indigenous Jewish community in the Gulf. Dubai already has a small Jewish community as well, but both countries espouse interfaith understanding and tolerance, something that differentiates them from other parts of the region, particularly at this time as we speak. Israel is a country with a GDP that is quite similar to the United Arab Emirates in terms of numbers. Its population is also quite similar, 8.5 million people. It is, however, poor in natural resources, but rich in high-tech and biotech resources. And this is, again, one of the similarities between both countries, because even if the United Arab Emirates is rich in oil reserves, both countries have a very similar desert-like climate, and both are focusing very much on high-tech and the development of biotechnological industries. Israel is also known for its creative, skilled, and multicultural workforce, which puts it in an extremely competitive position for investments in the entire region. Now, if we do fast forward from the time when the Abraham Accords were signed and look what's happened within a year, within just 1 year of the signature of this warm peace in the Middle East, we can see that 127 memoranda establishing various new connections and reducing barriers have been signed already. According to the RAND Corporation, further reduction of trading barriers between the countries will lead to a further increase in trade bilaterally, which can yield up to some $300 billion a year. So 127 memoranda agreed in just 1 year is quite a feat of success for any part of the world, and including the Middle East. We've seen a staggering 1.4 billion in trade between the Abraham Accord countries in just 1 year. These are numbers that before the agreements were signed looked quite impossible. Some trade existed informally or mostly going through other intermediaries, but this open trade yielding $1.46 billion in just 1 year is extremely impressive figure. It is an overall 222% increase just year on year. Looking at just the relationship between the UAE and Israel, the two biggest economies in the Abraham Accords framework, you can see that trade has reached almost $1 billion in value since the accords were signed, and it is expected to reach close to $2 billion by the end of this year. And these are rather conservative estimates, I believe, in my opinion, because the opportunities that will come forward from the full implementation and agreement of a free trade area will be massively important. Now, if trade is important between the countries of the Abraham Accords, there are two other areas which I'd like to focus on, which are perhaps the jewel in the crown of this agreement from an economic perspective. First is regional cooperation and integration. Regional cooperation and integration in the Middle East can yield massive benefits for the people who live in this part of the world and for the rest of the global economy, particularly if we start with different areas, looking at the opportunities that can emerge for creating new maritime and land routes, linking the Mediterranean and the Gulf with the global markets and the global economy. Currently, because of the history and the politics of the region, these maritime and land routes are not optimal, and further investment in the development through the cooperation within the Abraham Accords framework can yield really massive opportunities for the future and benefits for all. But there are other areas, agricultural ventures, to greatly enhance food and water security in a part of the world that has an endemic water scarcity, and it needs to focus on its own food security. And the UAE in particular is extremely focused on these two areas, the opportunities for investment and for cooperation and development with countries beyond the Middle East here is quite visible and quite important. New energy, communication and financial frameworks and platforms that connect the Middle East to Europe, Africa and Asia are already under discussion and certainly create another growth area which is important that requires regional cooperation and integration. Similarly, something that we are all struggling with, joint medical research and manufacturing facilities to increase the region's resilience to pandemics. We're still in the COVID-19 pandemic, but it has put to the front for all of us, I think, the requirement and the need to focus much more on medical R&D and manufacturing capacity globally, and particularly here in this part of the world. Collaboration in advanced technologies, pushing the boundaries on artificial intelligence, cloud computing, addressing the challenges of climate change or cybersecurity. Again, these are areas where both the countries in the region and Japan have much to say and offer. And last but not least, partnerships in developing regional tourist opportunities are also quite important for the future after the end of the pandemic. These are just some areas where regional cooperation and integration will be beneficial and where cooperation with other parts of the world is possible. The second great big area, in my opinion, is the openings and opportunities for third countries that the Abraham Accords create. And certainly further engagement and integration, including with the countries of Egypt and Jordan that have peace treaties with Israel, is extremely important as an area of growth for third countries engaging with the Abraham Accords states. Expanding the Abraham Accords to include other countries in the region and beyond will greatly enhance the opportunities that are created both within the Middle East, the Gulf area, and more broadly. And certainly building partnerships with countries beyond the region, in Asia, in Africa, in Europe, the European Union, India, Indonesia, Japan, Korea, the UK, are all partners that can stand to benefit greatly from engaging with the Abraham Accord states. And this is why this discussion is so timely and so important, particularly from the perspective of Japan. We've already seen some of these formats emerge. A new quad between India, Israel, the UAE, and the United States has emerged, focusing on trade, technologies, and on big data and maritime security. This is a great opportunity that could be replicated with other countries around the world. And particularly with Japan, because Japan and the UAE are natural and indispensable partners because of their existing trading relationships and their economic potential. The UAE is a hub for Japanese investments in the Gulf, and collaboration between the UAE and Israel only enhances those capacities and those abilities. And Japan has already invested massively in different projects. One in particular is the Corridor for Peace and Prosperity that links Israel, the Palestinians, and Jordan, and creates opportunities for growth in that area. So really, Japan is perhaps one of the foremost countries that can not only reap the benefits of the Abraham Accords, but contribute substantially to growth in the region, to innovation in key sectors, built on its prior investments. So thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you, and I look forward to the rest of the discussion today.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now, let's move on to the business session. The first panel discussion is about the potential of tripartite cooperation, prospective areas for creating mutual business opportunity. We are pleased to welcome moderator and panelists. The moderator is Mr. Koichi Nakagawa from Mitsubishi Research Institute. Now, I'll hand it over to Mr. Nakagawa.
ただいま、ご紹介に預かりました、三菱総合研究所の中川浩一と申します。
My name is Koichi Nakagawa from Mitsubishi Research Institute. This is a great honor for me to be able to serve as a moderator in such an important forum for the success of the forum, JETRO and METI and all the relevant parties. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude. In this first session, we have 4 prominent panelists, and we have only 40 minutes, very tight schedule, and we are online, but we would like to exchange opinions. But this is a great challenge for us to do it online in such a short period of time. So as a moderator, I would like to share with you the themes that we would like to discuss with the panelists and also the audience, based on which we would like all the panelists to start presentations or discussions. So, including your self-introduction, I would like to ask the panelists to take 7 to 8 minutes each to speak up. So first of all, I am the moderator. In 2020, in July, up to that time, I was with the Ministry of Forest, and I was a diplomat for 26 years. I was an expert diplomat. From August 2020, I am with this Mitsubishi Research Institute. The reason why I changed my job, that is because this research institute, as a consultant, opened a branch in the Gulf area, Middle East area, to support the area. And in March last year, we opened a branch office in Dubai, and also we established another office in the Gulf region. What we are aiming at is to solve social issues of the Gulf area and Middle East, and to support the government and also implementation of the successful solutions in the area, and also to promote businesses of Japan to this area. When I was a diplomat, I was an interpreter for Arab language, and I was really contributing to the region. And from the important people in this area, I was told why Japanese businesses are not coming to this region, why we have only Western companies here. And according to the survey of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the number of Japanese businesses is less than 1,000. In Asia, we have about 50,000 companies. So compared to that, this is very small. And why we have this discontent in this region? I have an answer. One is that Japanese government do not have sufficient initiatives. Moon Jae, the president of Korea, is visiting Middle East right now. And also Japanese government officials have not really visited the area. Minister Hagiuda mentioned something very important. So I would like to ask Mr. Hagiuda and Foreign Minister and also the other ministers to visit the area. And we used to have a K-Donor mission by the administration, and we would like to take this opportunity to have this kind of business opportunities again. And the interest of Japanese people in this area, and also a lack of understanding, is a problem, and we need to have more understanding and knowledge about the Middle East region. And also public-private cooperation is more important, and we'd like to solve these kind of challenges to go forward. As a think tank, our institute needs to know more about the region, as was presented right now. In the Middle East region right now, we have this diplomatic ties between Bahrain, Israel, and UAE established. So this is a very important atmosphere for economic expansion, and this is an impetus. And as in Asia, in this Middle East, we would like to have these new approaches for business expansion. However, during these 1.5 years, we do not have this dynamism, and Japanese companies are not really enjoying this dynamism yet. And also, Middle East countries are trying to go out of the dependency in oil. So we have a lot of challenges. And when we have challenges, we have opportunities for businesses. So now is the time for Japanese businesses to go into this area and region since COVID-19 started. They have vaccinations going on, so their economy is recovering and they are on the recovery track from COVID-19. So Middle East is taking the lead to recovery and also 80.6% of vaccination, and the Middle East challenges should be solved by all Japan efforts. And I'd like to ask panelists, Israel and UAE and the United States, and also Mr. Tamura from the Japanese government, please share this understanding to start the discussion how Japanese businesses can be more active in the region. Digital transformation of Israel should be more enjoyed by Japanese businesses. And under this circumstance, I would like to ask your opinions and feedbacks, comment. So first from UAE, His Excellency Juma Al-Qaid, please.
Mr. Nakagawa, and good morning to everyone. Before I begin, I just want to thank JETRO for organizing today's trilateral UAE-Japan-Israel Innovation Forum. I have the tremendous pleasure to work with colleagues from government of Japan and Israel as well on the cooperation in the economic side between our countries, just to help and support the private sector to get into the market and to collaborate further among each other. Would like also to take this opportunity and thanks to Expo that we came together to develop first of its kind platform between our three countries, which I believe it's a unique opportunity for the three nations to explore synergies and novel avenues of creative collaboration. The strategic focus will capitalize and complement our mutual strength to create joint opportunities between our three governments. First of all, looking at the history and Japan and Israel first mark 70 years of diplomatic relation this year, which is a major milestone. Japan has also been a strong economic partner for the UAE for the last 50 years. So there is a lot of history between the three nations, strong foundation, and the will to strengthen this relationship. One more important thing that we know and we are certain about that we have been also through COVID-19 years. Now this is the second year, and we learned that working with global partners is the only way to ensure economic recovery and the sustainability of the global economy. And this is notably why trade and investment partnership built on shared interest and common values, which is a key priority for the UAE. As such, I will do my utmost also during today's discussion to share UAE aspiration for this tripartite innovation cooperation. So I want to highlight also the recent development that happened in the UAE with the launch of the UAE's project of the 50s, comprehensive initiative that will guide the UAE's economic and social development over the next 50 years. The private sector is the key building block for our national ambitions. It will be the principal driver also of a competitive, innovative, and sustainable knowledge-based economy to spur greater innovation and investment across high growth sectors. So to this end, the UAE has launched several nationwide programs and approved new policies to support entrepreneurs and investors, underscoring as such our ranking of ease of doing business in advanced, and we also ranked 16th globally. Mindful of the time frame and to cite but a few examples also, recent legislative amendments include new companies law that allow companies to be 100% foreign owned and 100% of profit to be repatriated with no foreign exchange control. So all of those incentives will help and contribute the private sector to get into UAE market and to grow and prosper from the UAE to the region. UAE also has refined employment laws to create greater flexibility in the labor market. So moving from a job to another now it's become more flexible and easier. So this will help also entrepreneurs to grow in the UAE. So all of those efforts will help and the UAE to complete the ecosystem for doing business and make it ideal for investors. Also, in terms of creating an environment for innovation and investment and business expansion. So innovation is at the heart of this mission, and the UAE is sparing no efforts to develop the adequate regulatory framework, providing integrated support services, enhancing the technology infrastructure to ensure the availability of investment and financial incentives. And by leveraging also on commonality between our nations and optimizing the instruments that are already in place, we can paint horizon of economic cooperation between our three nations. I will stop here, and if you want me to continue, just let me know, Mr. Nakagawa.
Thank you very much. شكرا جزيلا. 日本と UAE、それからイスラエルの
Japan and UAE, and between Japan, UAE, and Israel, the innovation cooperation should be promoted. And to this end, we were able to receive a message from a high official of the government, and it is very meaningful and valuable to us. Thank you very much. Japan, UAE, and Israel are the theme of today's forum. And the core of this cooperation is the economy in this region. And what will happen in Saudi Arabia is something that we have to watch. The cooperation with the relationship with Saudi Arabia may not be favorable today, but Saudi Arabia and Israel may normalize the diplomacy. I think that the audience are quite interested in that topic. So from His Excellency Al-Qaid, if you could answer this question regarding normalization of the two countries' diplomacy, we would appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I'm not in a position to comment on a political question here. My area of expertise in economic. I believe that the UAE and Saudi Arabia are the largest economies in the region. We have a common interest in terms of achieving the economic integration within the GCC, and this will help also all investors from all over the world to benefit not only from UAE market but from the GCC market. So our efforts in the GCC is to also reach the economic integration that will enable investor to move through the GCC countries and have a larger market when they establish their businesses in the UAE or in any of the GCC countries. I think that in the future things might change, and also our role here today is to make sure that the private sectors will benefit from the existing opportunities. There are a lot of opportunities for the investor from Japan and from Israel also to benefit from in the UAE. I know we have a huge investments from Japan in the UAE, but they are only limited to certain sectors. And I will mention oil and gas, constructions, those are the classical sectors. However, other opportunities in the agri-technology, in financial services, those sectors which are evolving now, and we are building also a new ecosystem for them in the UAE, renewable energy, and Japan has also the potential to collaborate with the UAE here, and also it will now with also having the Israel economy, which is also well known in terms of innovation. I think we could complement each other and join together to announce a new area of cooperations in many different sectors.
ありがとうございました。シュクランジャズイラン。改めて
Thank you very much. The UAE and Israel has normalized the diplomacy, and the GCC leadership meeting was also held recently. I hope that it will develop further in the future. Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Haydar Shor from Israel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Nakagawa. First, I'd like to thank the organizers from all sides for this wonderful event and this opportunity to share our mutual understanding with both parties. I think that regarding the question that you've raised, the expectation of collaboration between the three countries is, I think, a huge and vast option and opportunity that we have. We are definitely looking forward to the continued and successful cooperation between Japan and Israel, as mentioned, our 70 years anniversary. And we hope to replicate this success with the United Arab Emirates. I just joined the Middle East department a year ago, and definitely we can see the giant strides that we're taking forward. Similar to the Japanese model that we have with you, the state of Israel is very happy to contribute to our parallel economies with the technological capabilities. And in exchange, we hope to gain the platform that will enable the penetration into these new challenging markets, such as Japan and the United Arab Emirates, but especially the neighboring markets. This trilateral initiative is not only beneficial for the three of us. We believe, in the way we see it, this is a bridge for us to reach out even further. And as mentioned by the former speakers, there is a lack of participation from some parties in the different markets. And we definitely see this as a great opportunity to expand what we are doing in those markets. And again, on one hand, we have this very senior relationship with the Japanese government. And on the other hand, this very new friendship with the UAE, which we believe can be a definite capability that will bring to the table. The similar markets, the similar terms of investment that the Japanese are bringing to Israel, as mentioned by our Director General, this year we've seen breaking records from the Japanese market. We hope to see matching or similar amounts from the Emirati market coming soon. And not just in that direction. We already see a lot of activity between the Israeli market and the Emirati market. Obviously, the Japanese market is already involved with our long-lasting relationship. The significant representation of Japanese companies in the UAE, in the United Arab Emirates, for us is a great model of how Japanese, Israeli, and Emirati collaboration can happen and actually take place in the UAE. First of all, geographically, it's closer. Culturally, some say it's also a little closer. And the fact you guys already have this advanced and immersive relationship between you with so many companies already sitting in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. For us, it's a great opportunity to mix and match between Israeli companies that are looking forward to getting those relationships and using this as a platform to enhance and recalibrate this relationship with Japanese companies. As you mentioned, in terms of digitalization and innovation is very strong. It's already happening on the Israeli market and with the Japanese market. And we already start to see Israeli companies migrating and getting into the UAE. The former speaker, His Excellency Akait, is a great partner for us to facilitate this. And we already see extensive activity in fields of investment and trade. But we estimate that between the three markets, there's significant potential also for a technological leap in heavy industry, especially for advanced technologies, field of automation, Industry 4.0, as something that we see those three different partners as a great platform for the industry and for the economy to grow, especially with private companies. As a government, we have a few programs that facilitate this for Israeli companies. And we in the Foreign Trade Administration are trying to help those companies reach the international markets. As the head of India, Africa, and Middle East Department, my job is to bring those companies and those industries to the United Arab Emirates and then open those markets for them. Also, I think it's worth mentioning financial technologies. Cyber protection technologies are definitely a common area of interest for three parties and the three partners of this wonderful event. And lastly, I think it's worth mentioning, I think it's especially between us and our Emirati friends, but the idea of food security and the matters of water and agriculture that are attached to it are great interest for us and our Emirati counterparts. And I believe that we can both benefit from the Japanese technological framework that we all grown to appreciate, especially in this very important matter for us and for our counterparts in the United Arab Emirates. I would touch the questions that you asked the former speaker, but in general, also I'm not authorized to answer this in specific. But regarding normalization options, I think it's very clear that the possibility of normalization with other countries, it's well addressed in the press, as you probably know. But I would say it's clear that the progress in trade relations with the UAE in such rapid pace and the progress in creating this trade agreement, again, with the wonderful counterparts that we have on the other side, is a very good way to show the Israeli commitment to establishing a viable relationship between the countries. The model of economic excellence and the benchmark we have with the Japanese economy over so many years is a great example for the economic relations that can mature between countries. And I think it's definitely a good example for all the countries that are debating whether to join the normalization initiative. And it's very clear for us that the one main factor that enables this kind of relationship is the economic factor. And the economic sphere that allows, in the end of the day, to improve the life of the population in the whole region. So again, seeing this very developed relationship we have with the Japanese and the rapidly expanding relationship with the UAE, I think it's pretty visible that this is a very good direction for every partner that would like to join this initiative.
Mr. Hayes さん、トダラバ、ありがとうございました。改めて
So once again, this forum is really significant. Israel and normalization of Arab countries. This is really a very good decision. And in the former administration, Trump administration, and the former Israeli administration and the Arab countries concluded these ties. So these diplomatic ties are going to be more and more advanced and stronger. And this is the determination, and Japanese business community is very well encouraged. Thank you very much. So next is from METI. Here is Mr. Tamura. Director of Middle East and Africa Division. I'm very sorry I said that government's initiative in Japan is lacking, but please give us any opposition. Yes, thank you very much once again. I am from METI. I'm the Director of Middle East and Africa Division. My name is Tamura. Thank you very much for all the people, stakeholders in this forum. So before my opposition, once again, I would like to say that about a year ago, we initiated net planning for this forum, but because of the COVID-19 situation, we were not able to have the forum until today. But once again, I am really grateful that we are having this forum today. So tripartite governments together for this forum, this style itself, well, even though this is online, this is the very first initiative for the three countries, Abraham Accords. Not only the politics, but in economy, that brings about such a great change and opportunities for the business community as well. In that sense, because of COVID-19, we are not able to visit the region. Still, we would like to take this opportunity so that we can make the greatest effort to support the region. So first about the expectation to the tripartite cooperation. First of all, Japan, UAE, and Israel. And with Japan, we have very close relations already with the UAE. For a long time, we have established such strong ties. And in UAE, we have very close to 400 companies located. Energy and infrastructure is the major industries. And recently, green and advanced technology, innovation, in these areas, we are advancing such cooperation. Last year, green initiatives started between government, hydrogen, fuel, ammonia, and carbon recycling. We have concluded MOUs for those projects, and we started concrete projects already. And about space, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries rocket, Hope, the Mars Explorer, it was launched, and last year, the startup company iSpace in Japan, I was involved in the Moon Explorer rover, and there was an announcement about the launch, and also in Dubai, digital JETRO is taking place. And the future stars for 5 years in a row. We have Japan Pavilion, and we have startups from Japan, and collaboration with the local companies are being observed. And Israel, the relations with Israel, startup nation Israel has a lot of Japanese companies. In 10 years, the number became 3.5 times as much. So it's really advancing. As the mass media said last week, according to the consultation survey in Israel, last year, the investment to Israel became the highest number. Compared to the previous year, it became 2.9-fold. Even under COVID-19, last year, Fujitsu started joint research development work in the local institute and entity. And NOAA became the head to establish a base in the region, and SoftBank as well have a project, Yoshi Cohen, and very actively they are investing into startups in Israel. So Japanese companies are pretty active in the region. And the METI is involved in the private companies and public entities. In 2017, for innovations, we established a platform, Japan-Israel Innovation Network, called GENE. And we started to dispatch missions and also started to exchange information, and we have missions. So we are collaborating very actively. So Japan, UAE, and Israel established such a great relationship and cooperation going forward, not only with those two countries. With 3 countries, we'd like to have business matchings and delegation sending. And we'd like to plan for seminars as well. And also expected cooperation areas. First, regardless of the areas, we would like to have various opportunities in each area for further cooperations from scratch, and that is something we have to do. Next, we would like to have another panel discussions where we can obtain some hints for the future. One example is global challenges. For solving those global challenges, we have innovation cooperation, climate change, healthcare, and also we have global common issues, and we have to solve those issues with innovation, expectation for which is great. So tripartite and innovation cooperation should contribute to the rest of the world. Green tech, smart city, healthcare, food security, in those areas we can collaborate more. And as I mentioned, according to the SE Council's report, for destination of investment from Japan, we used to focus on IT industry. However, the recent trend last year was life science, food tech, cyber, green tech, mobility. Those are increasing. Innovation Hub is the target, and they are attracting global talents. And startup giant Israel can attract so many people from all over the world. And also Japan has a network that's connected to the global society. And together we have a great opportunity to contribute to the innovation in the world. UAE, Israel businesses. And for them, I'd like to have a message that Japan can be utilized as a gateway to Asia for you. In January this year, we had a big multi-FTA regional comprehensive economic partnership, RCEP, involving Japan, China, Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. And about 30% of the world population and GDP are covered by RCEP. And TPP is already started. And for UAE and Israel people, please consider having more business with Japan.
And as I said earlier, this is just a kickoff meeting for us, and this is the first step to deepen the tripartite relationship further. And toward the relationship building, the delegations and seminars, as well as matchmaking, will be carried out. And we are still exploring opportunities. I hope that the companies in 3 countries will reach out to the Ministry of Economy in the 3 countries, JETRO, and other agencies for support and advice. The tripartite relationship, I hope that we will be able to promote that as a catalyst. Thank you very much.
大変、日本政府の現在の取り組みについて、丁寧に
For laying out the current initiative by the Japanese government. Mr. Tamura talked about delegation and seminar. This time we are taking quite a long time for the seminar, but as for delegation, I believe that that is also very important. The Middle East, the top level diplomacy is quite important. So there are various levels, but for example, the Minister of Economy in Japan should visit the Middle East, and at the same time, the Japanese companies should create a delegation which can visit UAE and Israel in the future. I think that that will be planned in the future. But Mr. Tamura, if you have any specific ideas, please let us know. Thank you very much for the question. Yes, as said at the outset, as of now, I was actually supposed to be in UAE and joining the seminar from UAE. That was my plan up until Christmas, but due to the Omicron variant, I was unable to go there, and hence I'm joining this seminar from Japan. As of now, there is no specific plan on large-scale delegation from Japan to the Middle East. However, at least, regardless of the tiers or levels to UAE, since there are many Japanese companies in Dubai, we hope that these companies will visit Israel. And also online business matchmaking opportunities are something that we can think about. And also, we have a pilot program with JETRO. For example, in Dubai and in Middle East, Arab Health and JITEC and other trade shows are available. And Israeli companies and Japanese companies can take part in these trade shows, and business matchmaking opportunities have already been set up in the past, and we hope that we will continue to do so in the future. Thank you very much. I am also in Tokyo, but I was supposed to be in Abu Dhabi now. We hope we can go there soon. So now, last but not least, we have Mr. Jonathan Ferziger. I have one question to you. So the business in the Middle East, the stability in the Middle East is very important. The Biden administration, I think that there is a very difficult situation with the relationship with the Middle East. And Iran is a key player there as well. So if you could touch upon that and the relationship between the US and Iran, I would appreciate it. And if you could give us an advice to succeed in the tripartite relationship, I would also like to hear that. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Nikogawa. It's an honor to share this platform with you, as well as with Under Secretary Al-Kait, with Mr. Tamura, and with Mr. Shore. I'm going to talk today about the risks and opportunities of doing business in the Middle East, about operating in a conflict zone and trying to create at least a measure of harmony. And as you asked, I'm going to touch on the issue of Iran. My perspective is mostly as an observer. I worked for the past 3 decades as a journalist, much of it with Bloomberg News, where I got glimpses of the early unseen contacts between Israel and the Gulf Arab states. I'm now with the Atlantic Council, where I've been researching the development of Gulf-Israel ties, and I'm currently looking into Japan's role in the region. Just 2 years ago, the idea of Emirati, Israeli, and Japanese officials appearing in a tripartite forum like this was impossible. Few would have believed what we've seen over the past 17 months, with hundreds of thousands of Israelis packing direct flights from Tel Aviv to Dubai, despite the pandemic. Or Abu Dhabi's Mubadala Sovereign Wealth Fund buying $1 billion plus stake in an Israeli offshore gas field. And how about the Israeli company Aerobotics that was hired to help safeguard the Dubai Expo through aerial drone surveillance? Certainly, there were quiet deals taking place before the Abrahamic Accords were signed, but of course, virtually everything was under the radar. Israeli companies went through creative maneuvers to disguise their origins because of the 75-year Arab boycott. One tech company chartered a white, unmarked Boeing 737 twice a week for 8 years. The plane was used to ferry dozens of engineers between Israel and the Gulf to install a smart city sensor network. In 2015, the secret venture's existence was revealed by a newspaper and abruptly came to a halt. It's that kind of episode, the instant cancellation of a multi-billion-dollar contract, that illustrates just how high the stakes here in the Middle East are. There are very good reasons why everything has to be handled so gingerly, whether it's a war in the Gaza Strip, or, as you say, conflict with Iran, the difficulties of navigating between the Biden administration and the lack of clarity between what's happening with Iran and the nuclear negotiations. Explosions in Lebanon, or sabotage in Gulf seaports. This region remains volatile. And yesterday's deadly attack on the fuel storage facility in Abu Dhabi was just the latest example. Much has changed for the better since September 2020, when the Abraham Accords were signed at the White House. But peace is fragile. The guessing game continues over which Arab country will be the next to normalize relations with Israel. And Mr. Nakagawa, as you alluded to with your question about Saudi Arabia, it may take a while. We've heard several examples today of trying to create conditions that will encourage businesses from Israel, the Emirates, and Japan to work together as the UAE and its neighbors seek to further diversify their economies from oil. The hunt is on for identifying the most promising tech investments. One of the most active players in this field is Our Crowd, an Israeli venture capital platform that I've been working with. Our Crowd was recently licensed to operate as a fund manager by the Abu Dhabi global market. It also sold a $25 million stake in October to Japan's SoftBank, the world's biggest VC, and it entered a strategic partnership aimed at identifying joint investment opportunities. As Mr. Tamura pointed out, SoftBank's Israel operation is led by Yossi Cohen. He's the former chief of the Mossad intelligence agency and one of Israel's key representatives. He was one of Israel's key representatives in negotiating the Abraham Accords with the UAE and Bahrain. SoftBank and Our Crowd are in good company. The Wall Street Journal reported last week that Mubadala in the UAE has invested more than $100 million in 6 Israel-connected VCs, including Mangrove Capital, Entree Capital, Aleph Capital, Viola Ventures, Pitango, and Nisma. Rather than a scattered shot approach, investors are looking for specific areas of technology and expertise. Israel is seen as among the world leaders in cybersecurity, though it's gotten into some trouble for the iPhone penetrating spyware produced by NSO. Israelis and Emiratis are teaming up on pharmaceutical research, propelled by demand for drugs addressing COVID-19. They're also working together on alternative fuels, desert agriculture, digital medicine, and quantum computing. Japanese capital plays a role in many of those investments. In reflecting on the theme of this panel, creating mutual business opportunity, it's important to recognize one essential element of the Abraham Accords. The agreements are not simply about government-to-government relationships. They also emphasize people-to-people connections. And throughout Israel, the UAE, there's a groundswell of optimism and curiosity. I've noticed it. People, for the first time, can talk directly with each other and hash out ideas together. The cross-cultural human interactions are not only encouraging signs of peace, they create the conditions and the momentum for creative business ventures and unexpected synergies. Business has a vested interest in the building of people-to-people ties, whether it's in academia, interfaith encounters, or cross-border hackathons. Here in Israel, a friend of mine, Danny Hakim, is trying to bring people from conflicting cultures together through sports. His nonprofit organization, Budo for Peace, is based on the values of harmony and self-restraint that are infused in the Japanese martial arts. Danny, who's a 7th degree black belt, brings Jewish and Arab young people together through a network of local sports clubs across Israel. He's now scaling up the project to go beyond karate and judo and expand across the region under the name Sports for Social Change. The principles he teaches, the empty hand, the clear mind, the open heart, these are principles that can also be useful drivers in the broader business environment. As all of you here from the UAE, Japan, and Israel explore the opportunities and the risks of investing together, it's worthwhile to cultivate an appreciation for each other's unique cultures and work toward bringing at least some degree of harmony to this unpredictable region. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jonathan. 冒頭私申し上げます通り、日本は中東地域
As I mentioned before, Japan right now 89.6% we depend on their oil. So this is related to our business. For our business, stability of the region is very important. Biden administration is involved in the region, and this is going to be continuously very important for Japan. As was in the keynote speech last year, US, UAE, India, and Israel established an economic forum, another quad. So Mr. Tamura, first, between these three countries and the US. Together, we would like to draw a big dream, as Mr. Tamura said, and this is going to be a kickoff. This is the first step for all of us. We'd like to continue a second step and a third step, and we'd like to send delegations, and we'd like to continue the effort. So today, thank you very much for all of your effort and participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for moderator and panelists and informative discussion. Now, let's move on to the next panel. The next panel discussion is about creating a new business through innovative solutions, initiatives of private sectors. We are pleased to welcome moderator and panelists. The moderator is Dr. Shai Moses from the Ministry of Economy and Industry of Israel. Now, I'll hand it over to Dr. Moses.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today with all of you at the Trilateral Innovation Forum, and thank you for joining us for the second panel of the event. I'm Dr. Shai Moses from the Ministry of Economy and Trade in Israel, part of the Foreign Trade Administration. And together with my colleagues here today, we are pleased to organize this forum. In this particular panel that we have, which is focused on the private sectors, about innovative solutions coming from the private sectors, we have three distinguished speakers with us today, panelists. I will ask them now for a short introduction of themselves and the companies, entities that they are working in. And let us start with Dr. Sulaiman Al-Nuaimi, CEO of Government Affairs, Al-Dara, United Arab Emirates. Please, Doctor, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sulaiman Al-Nuaimi from Al-Dara. I am CEO of Al-Dara Government, CEO of the Government Affairs of Al-Dara. Today, it's a pleasure for me to speak about what Al-Dara doing for innovation. I think Al-Dara Corporation with the Israeli company and to other companies, and the first delegation to visit Israel to find new agri-technology there and opportunities. Also, we start negotiation and GV company. This is the company of the clean water from the air. And also, this is the company to help people in remote area to find the water and fresh water. Also, the other companies in Israel, Netavim company, this is the top irrigation solution for subsoil irrigation. We use this is soil irrigation for the other farms also in United States. Also, we can get it the less water wastage in our farms. For innovation also, we have in Al-Dahra Biwa, this is our partner also, to get greenhouses in our farm in UAE that produce tomatoes and other crops in the extreme weather, production all the year round, also using 70% less water for this is the typical greenhouses. And also we use other technology in our farms in Romania. This is at Dahra Agri-Coast. We have there more than 56,000 hectare project in Praila Island. We started this is our trial in 5,000 hectare to succeed to have zero CO emission, and also to back CO2 to the soil by speed, and to use processing amazing to the soil. And what we do, this is the technique to minimum tillage, less soil, okay, to increase also use perennial crops like alfalfa, less usage to fertilizer and pesticide. What's the benefit about this one? To increase soil organic matter also, and also to increase photosynthesis of the production of oxygen, also to higher yield and higher water. Sorry?
The short introduction just about the company, but let's save also this information for the questions that we have in the panel. Let's move now to Mr. Oren Rosenzweig, just to a very short 1-minute introduction. Oren, please.
1 minute, sorry.
1 minute, that's kind of tight. I mean, you can pull up the slides. I have something maybe that will help. So I'll just start as you kind of pull it up. So I'm Oren Rosenzweig, co-founder and chief business officer and the board member of Innoviz. And just, before founding Innoviz, I was an officer at the IDF. Can we? Yeah, okay, now it works. An officer at the IDF in a unit called 81, doing design of electro-optic systems, a consultant in BCG, a VC, bachelor's from the Technion, and MBA from Chicago Booth. 3 children and a dog, and I love them all very much. Very short about Innoviz. We founded the company in 2016. Since then, grew to over 400 employees. What we do is we develop a sensor that is using lasers to create 3-dimensional images. This sensor is called the LiDAR, and this kind of sensors can be used in many applications. Our focus is on the automotive industry for safety and also for autonomous driving applications. The company is now a public company, traded on the NASDAQ under the ticker INVZ, and we raised a total of $622 million across private and public rounds. The first cars that you'll be able to buy with our products, like the products like the ones you see on the right-hand side of the slide, will be available later this year. So BMW, the new 7 Series, and the new electric SUV, the BMW iX, is going to have the Innoviz One LiDAR in it. So just kind of to conclude, we hope that by continuing to develop these products, we can bring safety and comfort to the lives of millions of people. So I'll kind of stop it here, and we can talk about Japan and UAE collaborations as we go to the questions.
Great, thank you very much, Oren. Now I will introduce Mr. Akimoto, co-founder and general partner of Art Partners. Mr. Akimoto, please introduce yourselves and your company.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Moses. I'll try to speak as fast as possible. Hi, everyone. It is my honor to be part of today's great event, and I would like to express my sincere thanks to those who gave me this opportunity. I'm Nobuyuki Akimoto, co-founder and general partner of AT Partners. Prior to AT Partners, I used to lead corporate venture capital activities of NTT and NTT Docomo about 15 years, including almost 10 years assignment in Silicon Valley. So what AT Partner is doing? We are the open innovation enabler, providing 3 services. First, fund of funds. We invest in top-tier VC fund. AT Partners One completely focused on the investments in Israeli VCs. So far, we invested in 12 VCs, 14 funds in Israel in order to be the bridge between the Israel startup community and the Japanese large corporations. The VCs we invested in have the great portfolios that we can expect both collaboration with the companies in Japan and financial return. Second, support the business development activities between our LPs and our indirect portfolios, which are now more than 160 startups. I have confidence in having more information of the prospective startups for the open innovation rather than other structure. Third, we also support our indirect startups in their efforts to expand in Japan. Moreover, you may understand us the evangelist of the open innovation and Israel. Since the establishment of METI Partners, we have been closely working with the Embassy of Israel in Japan, Israeli VCs, and the startups, of course, JETRO, to make Japanese large corporations more interested in reaching out Israeli startup community. I hope I may be of some help today by sharing what I have done so far. I'm really excited to be part of today's panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Akimoto. Indeed, this forum came from even demand from the surface. We have very good and warm relations between Israel and Japan for many, many years. And now in this past year and a half, we already see these warm relations between UAE and Israel. And this idea of showing first our bilateral cooperations, bilateral initiatives, and then maybe even to think of trilateral potential of cooperation and even moving beyond our countries to the global markets. I think this is the, this really points on the time that companies are exploring these kinds of opportunities. So with that in mind, my first question, which will be an identical question for all the panelists, will be maybe to elaborate on this kind of bilateral cooperation. And my question is as follows. How do you appreciate so far your experience in collaborating with business partners from the other countries represented in this panel? What will be your recommendation for our audience that are watching us now when they wish to explore new international business opportunity with their counterparts across our three countries? So I will ask the same question for all of you. Please try to give us your reply within 5 minutes. Thank you. Let's start with Mr. Rosenzweig, please.
Sure, and maybe let's use the slides again, if you can pull them up, and I'll go to the relevant slide. So I think I'll use an example for answering your question, and this will be from Japan, my example. I will try to go to the slide using this clicker here. Sorry, let me go back. So we've been very active in Japan. In the automotive industry, we have been working very closely with car makers and to integrate our LiDAR into their cars. And we also have ongoing projects in other markets. Like an example I will show soon with Obayashi. We have local partners, Macnica and also Nexty, that have their kind of professional local support teams. And they also bring us new business opportunities. One such kind of, let's say, success story is something we have with Macnica together with Obayashi. These are, in this example that I will show you now, I hope the video will work, okay. Obayashi is using the Innoviz LiDARs to automate the construction site. So as you know, Obayashi is one of the largest construction companies in Japan. And at first, they're using the LiDARs to maintain safety at the site. And we've been working with them, I would say, for over 3 years on this thing. with a local technical team that is supporting them. And what you see here is kind of the result of this work, where they have kind of announced the technology that they're going to use, where LiDAR is, I would say, the main building block for this technology. And we hope that over the next few years, this will kind of expand and become, big business for us. Especially, as I said earlier, our main business is in the automotive industry, but automotive is something that takes many years until the product cycle kind of completes and the volumes ramp up. So this is an opportunity for us to increase our sales in something that is more kind of short term and faster to get to revenue. And just kind of to conclude, in terms of just our experience from bilateral agreements, and I'm using here as Japan as an example, in a more general way, I think that we've seen that some of the national bodies can really help the interests of importers. So groups like JETRO in Japan, and of course in Israel, the IEI, the Israel Expert Institute, through their activities, this really helps us to get wide exposure to, let's say, almost every company in the country and assistance. So I think this is also true for Israel's Economic Attaché Office in Japan and including in other countries. I'll kind of pause here from this example from Japan, and we'll talk about UAE maybe in one of the following questions.
Thank you. Mr. Akimoto, you already also mentioned that you been in touch with Israeli partners already. Maybe you could share with us some examples of your activities so far, and maybe some tips that you have for these kinds of bilateral cooperation.
Yeah. Let me share what I have learned from the activity with the Israeli startup community. So in general, more and more Japanese large corporations are getting positive on the open innovation with the Israeli startups. As many of you might have known, Japanese investments in Israeli startups reached a record of 2.9 billion in 2021, which is 190% leap compared to 2020. This is the proof that more Japanese large corporations have realized that Israeli startups are attractive for their open innovation partners and how serious they are about working with Israeli startups. There may be many reasons why Israeli startups have been getting the traction of Japanese large corporations. And one of the reasons why it might be obvious. Of course, they have the great technology, but other thing I would like to share is that we can see some successful cases that appears in Japanese media, which are the cases like the big investment, new applications, new services, new business in Japan. Fortunately, I got involved in the several cases of the collaboration between Israeli startups and the Japanese large corporations, and I would like to share a key success factor I got through the experience. There are many factors for the success, but I don't think I have enough time today. I would like to share one thing. Agree and share the common big goal, or I should say big picture. Many of may say it is obvious, but the important points are, for example, your executive really agreed to the goal at the level of individual, just stamping the internal approval document. I mean, 決裁文書にハンコを押す in Japanese, which is not I'm talking. So important thing is agree to the goal at the level of individual. Second, we start from the small project, and its goal may be clear enough, but we may come up with the situation that your detailed interest conflict with the one of the startups in the project. We will have the heated discussion, but we can get over it as long as we can continue to share the common goal or big picture. Whenever we have the detailed conflict, we can get back to the big picture and continue to work together. So I believe this will work for trilateral collaboration in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Akimoto. So moving to Dr. Al-Nuaimi. Doctor, you already in your opening remarks, you mentioned some of the cooperations you have with Israeli companies. Maybe you could focus again on these kinds of success already examples that you've seen from your perspective, please.
Sure. I will explain how Dahra cooperation with Israeli company. Now we have a cooperation already with two companies, is Watergen and Netavim, and also we have three companies in our agenda during 2022. This is cooperation, I think it's the highest technology we use. This is two companies, Watergen and Netafim. Already we started last year with Watergen in the local market also for the fresh water, creating water from the air. And we use a lot of machines and we use it also. Now this is technology in the greenhouses also we can use it in our farms. We just under trial, this is the technology to get it water from the air to use it for the agriculture sector. About Netavim also, there is cooperation with this company, not just for UAE, to other countries also. We started the cooperation in Africa, especially in Rwanda, together, to work together to development the land there and to development the agriculture sector also. Netafim, we use it, this is technology in our farm in United States, and we use it also in other companies in Egypt and also in Namibia. We use this is technology with Netafim. In the future, we have the other companies is coming in 2020. This is our plan. We get it good cooperation with this company. We found a lot of opportunities also to the companies to get more cooperation together in the future. That's one thing.
Excellent. For the panelists, and this time let's focus on cooperation beyond the bilateral cooperations that we have already. Let's try to explore trilateral cooperation or even moving to global markets together. And maybe we'll start with Dr. Al-Nuaimi. Doctor, which sectors do you think could be with high potential for having future collaborations between our three countries and even beyond? Which kind of global markets do you think that we could think of to explore together when we reach out to the world?
I think in Africa, it's the good opportunities there to start together to work is there. And also there is a huge market also in other countries. We can work together, GCC country and other country in China or in Japan. Already our production, we send it to a lot of countries in worldwide. You know, Al-Dahra, it's the biggest company to produce animal feed. We get it a lot of markets also in the global. Our footprint in 5 continents and our production we get it for a lot of countries in the world, like Japan, Korea, China, and Middle East, and also European country and United States. I think it's good to start with the companies, other companies, to corporation together to find a new market and a new solution for especially for the food and the feed, to get it started from the Africa and to find other markets from the other global. That's it, I think, from this side. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Yeah, I take note that Aldara is one of the bigger companies in the UAE with many segments that you deal with, and this is interesting to see that sometimes we think of innovation, we think about the high tech per se, but maybe we can think of innovative solutions for the animal feed, for food safety, going together to Africa. This is a very interesting idea, and also to other GCC countries. So thank you for your remarks. Now I move to Mr. Rosenzweig, Oren, if I may. I'm aware that Innovis Technologies is already active in many markets, North America, and you mentioned Japan and elsewhere. Do you envision some of your market expansion taking place in the Middle East or maybe other Asian regions? What about any kinds of prospect for collaborations with Japanese and Emirati partners? Please.
Sure. Not a doctor yet, just Mr. We can in the meantime pull up the slide. So you're right. I mean, as you mentioned, Innovis is already very active globally, and also especially in Japan through our partners there. But we're still looking for our first opportunities in the UAE actually, and just recently started kind of engaging around there. And we hope that this forum can help us find either a business partner in the UAE or specific opportunities there. So if any company, either of course in Japan, but also in the UAE, wants to discuss any opportunity, then I'll be happy if you reach out to me or to the company. I can kind of share the contact details for that. In a more kind of general way, to answer your question, I think that the market for LiDAR and the use cases, the opportunities are actually growing very rapidly. And this is globally and also in many different industries. So I mentioned automotive, but also around delivery vehicles, smart city applications. We've been very active in multiple places, including in China, around smart city applications, industrial applications, engineering, agriculture is also something that we put a lot of effort in, mining, construction, and I can kind of keep going. And these are, of course, all very global applications, and we'll be very happy to collaborate either with UAE partners or, of course, Japanese partners around these applications around the world.
I move now to Mr. Akimoto. Mr. Akimoto, you already mentioned about the investment patterns between our countries that are going up. I also take note here that you mentioned already almost $3 billion of investment between our countries. If I take that also with our trade, volume of trade, that is also almost like a bit more than $3 billion. So we see that investment and trade are going hand in hand. I also see it in our relations with UAE, when we see more increased trade and more increased investment going in parallel. So my question to you is that, given your experience with Israeli venture capital firms and of course Japanese investment ecosystem, how do you think we can expand this already bilateral good investment cooperation into trilateral cooperation with Emirati investments and maybe even beyond?
Yeah. So let me get to the point. It will take time for Japanese corporations or investors to have the largest scale of investment in UAE, like what we have invested in Israel. So we need some shortcut, which will be the investment with Israel and or via Israel to UAE. Or we, I mean Japan and the UAE, can start from co-investment in Israeli startups, which will benefit for both countries, I believe. But here is what I would like to say about the potential of collaboration beyond the region. Since this is going to be or should be the largest scale of cooperation among three countries, we need a big picture that we can continue to share, as I mentioned before. There are a lot of potential areas that we can work together, including the areas that Dr. Nuaimi mentioned, which may be energy or fintech, logistics, smart mobility, using innovative technology, agri-tech, digital health, cybersecurity. Another area may be climate tech, including renewable energy and resilience against natural disaster prevention technology. The underwater volcano of Tonga erupted on Saturday, triggering tsunami. I do hope everyone is safe. But when we take a look at these potential areas, we may notice the words which can combine all of the potential areas, which is smart city, or we may even call smart nation. Three countries can work together to come up with the big picture of smart city or smart nation. A technology needed for area may be necessary for other areas as well. In this sense, to have the big picture combining all the areas that we can work together is really, really important, I believe. For example, NTT, which is one of my LPs, is now promoting IWON, which is Innovative Optical Wireless Network, consisting of all photonics network, digital twin computing, and cognitive foundation, transcending the limits of the internet, overcoming the increases in power consumption, which are necessary for all potential areas. Other example is that Sompo, which is also one of my LPs, has the joint venture with Palantir, which can provide a platform for big data analysis. This is also necessary for all areas. And we can introduce the solution to Arab world as white labeled products of UAE, and or we can sell the products to Asian countries. As you may know, Japanese corporations have a well-established business infrastructure with Asian countries. I would like to emphasize here is that we are not discussing the market in only three countries, but we're discussing the markets in other Asian countries and Arab world, which are big enough for us. Once we come up with this kind of the big picture, necessary investment will follow, I believe. VCs, venture capital like us can take the lead. This is what I would like to say. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much for your remarks, Mr. Akimoto. If someone from the panelists wants to comment very briefly on someone else's speech, please signal. And if not, I will let me to conclude the panel. So I think we saw here a very good example, what Mr. Akimoto mentioned, the big picture. There is a willingness in all three countries to promote these kinds of business cooperations between our lovely countries. This effort that we're doing here today, having people live from Japan, from Israel, from UAE in different time zones, and we have hundreds of people in the audience are eager to listen to what the panelists have to say. This all show there is a lot of willingness and openness to explore these opportunities. Ourselves, we have the economic mission of Israel in Japan, led by Mr. Daniel Kolbar there, and we have a new mission, economic mission, scheduled to be open in the Emirates pretty soon, to be led by Mr. Aviat Amir. But we have the Embassy of Japan in Israel that I see are very much engaged, and we have JETRO and many other partners from the private sector, from different governmental agencies, are all keen to work together and help our industries in each of our countries to collaborate together, to seek business opportunities and even go beyond. So I hope with our panel, we also contributed a bit to this kind of discussions that ongoing. Let us serve as this kind of appetizer to explore these kinds of opportunities, and everyone in the audience who believes he or she has something to offer in this kind of cooperation is very much invited to be in touch with us, and we try to explore and to promote that as well. So with that, I conclude this panel. I thank you very much, all the panelists, for taking the time to participate today. And with that, I return the microphone to the organizers. Thank you very much for all your cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for moderator and panelists and sharing your experience and insights. Now, please let me give a closing address. Let me introduce myself again. My name is Mitsuhito Sendai, Executive Vice President of JETRO. Thank you very much for attending this forum today. Through this forum, I hope you have sensed the business potential of the economic sphere in the Middle East, the Abraham Accords expands, and the areas of particular promise under the trilateral collaboration. This forum is not the end. We are planning various new events to support your creation of new business more directly and specifically. For example, in Israel, the Embassy of Japan and other parties concerned are having discussions with the Israeli government to dispatch a mission of Japanese companies in the UAE to Israel as one event commemorating the anniversary of diplomatic relations. The details will be announced later, and we hope you will take advantage of these opportunities. JETRO has offices in Dubai and Tel Aviv, as well as all over Japan. If you have any inquiry regarding business between the three countries, please feel free to contact your nearest JETRO office. Thank you very much for your attendance. Shukran jazilan. Toda raba.